She chose not to be here.
Judge, can you hear me? Oh, okay.
Yes, you read that correctly. The judge actually stormed out in the middle of the hearing after one of Blake Lively's former staffers dropped a revelation that nearly sent the courtroom into shock. What began as a back and forth about workplace harassment instantly spiraled into something closer to a survival thriller, complete with scissors, bleach, and a barricaded supply closet. At this stage, Blake isn't really mounting a defense. Every time someone speaks, she's practically handing the prosecution a brand new charge on a silver platter. And you might be asking, how on earth is Blake Lively's trial, originally scheduled for 2026, already dominating the news cycle in 2025? Well, brace yourself, because what unfolded 2 days ago wasn't the trial at all. It was just the pre-trial evidentiary hearing. And it turned out to be a circus. The day had been expected to run like a dry procedural formality. A quiet session where both sides politely mapped out their positions with no fireworks, no cameras, and certainly no scandals. On paper, the plan was simple. Defense attorneys, prosecutors, the presiding judge, and a few clerks calmly reviewing documents. Nothing more. But that illusion shattered. In the courtroom sat Blake's elite legal team on one side, and on the other, representatives for 5 former employees connected to her shuttered lifestyle venture. Preserve. Judge Curtis Y.M. Lennox, a seasoned federal hand with decades of experience, entered the room with a tight agenda and a case summary in hand. This wasn't a trial about guilt or innocence. It was a Rule 26F conference, a meeting to nail down timelines, define the scope of accusations, and flag any evidence that hadn't yet been disclosed. And that's exactly the moment things went off the rails. Just before the session wrapped, as Judge Lennox called for final clarifications, a woman from the gallery suddenly stood up. She was one of the plaintiffs in the sealed employment case, and she wasn't supposed to say a word. Breaking every protocol, she began speaking. Even her own lawyers looked blindsided. With her voice shaking, she described an incident no one had ever documented before, something that allegedly happened in 2015 at a preserve retreat in Aspen. She claimed that during a heated fight over marketing deadlines, Blake hurled a wine glass across the room. The glass, according to her, smashed against her shoulder, slicing deep into the skin. Hospital records, she said, showed 6 stitches and nerve damage to prove it. Intro.
And they were paid hush money, apparently, and Leslie Sloan, Blake Lively's publicist, and Ryan Reynolds' publicist, helped bury the...
But here's the detail that turned the courtroom on its head. The woman alleged that Blake's camp handed her $40,000 in hush money to block a formal complaint and forced her to sign a non-disclosure agreement, an NDA, under pressure. She didn't list names. She wasn't holding physical proof. But she did point toward Preserve's internal HR incident log, which, for the record, has not yet been filed with the court, and referenced internal Slack messages where staff allegedly mocked Blake's temper. The entire room went still. A federal marshal moved in to escort her away, but the judge, instead of silencing her, stopped. He looked straight at both legal teams and posed the question that may have shifted the case forever. Were either of you aware of this event or any other injuries tied to the defendant's behavior and chose not to reveal it? No one answered. What followed was pure courtroom whiplash. Blake's defense fumbled out excuses about irrelevant character evidence, while the prosecution rifled through their folders as if they'd just struck gold. Judge Lennox, usually the model of composure, snapped. He slammed his gavel twice, rose from the bench, and publicly scolded both sides for breaking court rules, stalling discovery, and possibly concealing critical facts. And then came the moment no one expected. He left. He didn't call for a recess. He didn't adjourn. He stood and declared, quote, "If this is the standard of honesty I'm expected to tolerate, then you're wasting federal time. This is not Hollywood. This is federal court." And with that, he walked out. So what does this all mean? First, the hearing is now officially suspended. The judge is reviewing both sides for potential contempt of court, which means if either party intentionally withheld damaging evidence or let falsehoods enter the record, sanctions are on the table. Second, the bench is weighing whether to unseal major portions of the Preserve workplace case file, including internal communications, accounting documents, and possibly medical records tied to multiple staff injuries between 2013 and 2016. And third, the public narrative surrounding Blake Lively just veered off a cliff, from celebrity caught in a toxic workplace mess to possible perpetrator of workplace violence and cover-up. Not exactly the image of a woman fighting against Hollywood's supposed dark machinery. To put it bluntly, this wasn't a meltdown. It was a legal firestorm, the kind no PR strategy can smother. Blake entered that hearing styled as a concerned co-founder. She left facing potential civil liability, charges of witness tampering, and even obstruction of justice, all before her actual trial has even begun. And if you assume the wine glass episode was just another salacious anecdote in a bloated case file, think again. Because the second that plaintiff stood up and spoke, the entire case warped from Hollywood workplace gossip into something much darker. We're talking corporate misconduct, hush money, and possible criminal negligence. The woman, whose name is still redacted in filings, made one thing clear: this wasn't about a single violent outburst. It was about an entire culture of manipulation built into Preserve's DNA. Remember Preserve? That overpriced wannabe lifestyle bazaar selling jars of jam and rustic aprons as artisanal chic. The same site that collapsed just 2 years after launch under mysterious circumstances. Yes, that one. Well, according to this former staffer, its implosion wasn't just bad business. It was fueled by a workplace poisoned by intimidation, abuse of authority, and a calculated reliance on legal gag orders. Here's what her account laid bare. Employees were chronically underpaid, grinding through 60 to 80-hour weeks, and constantly threatened with firing if they dared to challenge executive calls, especially budget cuts, branding flops, or Blake's increasingly unpredictable moods. The word she used? Erratic. And the revelations only worsened. She alleged that employees who tried to quit or file HR grievances were quietly handed severance packages. Nice sounding on paper. In practice? Bribes disguised as payouts tied to NDAs. In plain English, hush money. And it wasn't rogue managers making those calls. She claimed it was organized with Blake's knowledge and signed approval. Yes, actual paperwork with her initials allegedly exists. Whether those documents will hit the court record is another explosion waiting to happen. But circling back to the most explosive piece of testimony, the Aspen dinner. This was an executive gathering during Preserve's 2015 winter retreat. By her sworn account, the team was hashing out a failed influencer partnership when tensions spiked. Blake, enraged over missed publicity goals, allegedly hurled a full glass of red wine across the table. It struck the woman's shoulder, shattered, and tore through her blouse, leaving a wound near her collarbone. The medical toll? 6 stitches, nerve trauma, and lasting psychological distress. She said she was rushed to a local clinic under a fake name, billed as a kitchen accident. The records were buried. Her contract was rewritten, and 2 weeks later she was handed a $40,000 check alongside an NDA allegedly arranged by Blake's private counsel. Intentional harm. Coercion. The subtext didn't need spelling out. The silence that followed was heavy. No bailiff moved. The judge stayed quiet. It was the unmistakable moment in every scandal where the air shifts, when everyone realizes they're not hearing allegations anymore, but glimpsing the outline of a federal crime. Reporters in the back row typed like their careers depended on it. The prosecution's younger lawyers whispered furiously, visibly shaken. And Blake? According to one observer sitting 3 rows behind her, she looked drained, pale, as if she knew exactly what domino was about to fall. Because this wasn't a casual accusation anymore. This was the blueprint of a federal violation. Workplace injury suppression, witness silencing, obstruction of justice, and that was only the second chapter of the day. But just as it seemed Blake's legal nightmare couldn't deepen, another figure entered the frame. Bernie. Or, as the filings spell it, Bernard Collins, executive producer, creative lead, and, apparently, Preserve's walking HR disaster. At first, Bernie had been painted as the lone bad actor. The familiar trope. The power-hungry exec accused of harassing staff while upper management claimed ignorance. For months, that was the media's narrative. Bernie lit the fire, Blake just stood nearby. Except that illusion just collapsed. New testimony, now formally admitted after last week's courtroom chaos, paints a different picture. Blake wasn't oblivious to Bernie's conduct. She was allegedly complicit, even encouraging it, ridiculing complaints in private, and protecting him because his presence made the company look innovative and edgy. Innovative and edgy. Let that sink in. This wasn't clueless leadership. This was calculated optics. Exhibits 27 and C30? Screenshots from Slack conversations between Blake and Bernie. In one, Blake dismisses a harassment complaint from a junior staffer as nothing more than oversensitivity. Then comes the kicker. Keep her on the payroll. She photographs well. Good optics. Yes, that's the direct quote. Another message has her mocking a worker who quit over Bernie's behavior. She didn't get the culture. We're not Whole Foods. Her attorneys argued the snippets were out of context. But whether or not context exists, the optics are toxic. Because those chats show more than negligence. They show leadership weaponizing abuse to polish a brand. And Bernie's side? They detonated their own bomb. Outside court, Bernie's lawyer Calvin Dre told reporters that Blake wasn't merely complicit. Her office ran the spin machine once allegations bubbled up in 2016. According to him, Bernie, now apparently flipping to save himself, was instructed to keep certain liabilities on staff for appearances, while Blake's PR team smothered leaks with payouts, which means Bernie may take the stand against Blake, and that changes the entire game. Now, it's not about one rogue executive. It's about a system Blake allegedly engineered. A toxic work culture where manipulation, gaslighting, and enforced silence weren't mishaps. They were strategy. Legal analysts now call it less a civil labor case than a web of corruption. And the prosecution? They're thrilled. The second those Slack logs were authenticated, their tone shifted. They're not just representing mistreated workers anymore. They're building a case that could escalate into felony charges if Blake knowingly buried harassment claims. The central question isn't Bernie's guilt. It's how long Blake protected him, and how deep she went to preserve a glossy brand image while employees collapsed behind the curtain. And just as that firestorm raged, another explosion hit, this time from Blake's personal life. Because of course it did. Enter Taylor Swift, yes, her. According to newly surfaced texts, Blake tried to drag her closest friend into the crisis. And when Taylor refused, Blake lashed out. Here's the sequence. As preserved scandals piled up, Blake allegedly leaned on Taylor, asking not just for private support, but for a public statement clearing her name, framing her as the unaware CEO blindsided by misconduct. Taylor declined. She said she couldn't speak on an ongoing case and that it wouldn't be fair to the women affected. Diplomatic? Absolutely, but Blake didn't take it that way. What came next were text exchanges later leaked through encrypted backup logs, now being reviewed as potential evidence. In them, Blake wrote to Taylor, "After a decade, you owe me. If you walk away now, don't expect me to protect your name when I speak. I defended you in rooms that would have buried you. And finally, this friendship lives or dies by loyalty." Taylor's reply,